we have three speakers. Professor Tanaka is still with us, so for those who have comments and questions from the first keynote, you can still ask them, raise them a bit later. Let me first introduce Professor Yos Santasombat. Professor Yos teaches at Chiang Mai University. His work, I'm a fan of his work. He's worked on, he has published books on the Chinese capitalists in Southeast Asia, Chinese capitalism, Chinese interest in Southeast Asia, and based in Chiang Mai. We don't see him as much here, so this is the first time I think we have you, Professor Yos, as a speaker on a nicest public forum. So welcome, very warm welcome. So can we start with you? The issue we're looking at, the Mekong region is very dynamic. Population of more than 260 million, right? Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and a GDP of over 800 billion, and probably one of the fastest growing regions in the world. It's half of ASEAN. It's the mainland part of ASEAN, so it's very dynamic. But it has its challenges. On the one hand, growth trajectory is pretty upward sloping. Cambodia 7-8%, Vietnam 6-7%, Myanmar 5-6%, Thailand 3%, Laos 6-7%. So very fast growing area. But it also has its challenges. It has this river that runs across the region, up and down, upstream, downstream. And over the years, similar, analogous to the South China Sea. You look at South China Sea, the issue and challenge in the South China Sea is that China has constructed these artificial islands and weaponized them in the South China Sea. So in the mainland Southeast Asia, there have been a number of dams, not just Chinese dams, also a lot of Lao dams, Thai dams. Cambodia also wants to have dams too. But the Chinese dams are the upper north, the uppermost part of the region of the river. And this presents a certain challenge because when the water is low, when we beyond the monsoon season like we are now, sometimes we have a drought. And it appears that the Chinese dams have more control, more say, more leverage over how the water flows and how much it flows downstream. And of course, we have two downstream countries here, which I will introduce shortly, two speakers from Cambodia and from Vietnam. Communities in Cambodia and Vietnam, I think over 60 million people rely on the Mekong River downstream for their livelihoods. So let me first start with Professor Yos. The main issue is you have a common regional resource. It's the river that goes north to south, but it has to be used and shared by a number of countries. But the countries that are north, upstream, get to have it first. So Thailand not so affected, Laos not as much affected, but Cambodia and Vietnam a lot. What's your view on, especially being based in Chiang Mai? You have and you've done a lot of research on this too. So please go ahead.
Before I go to the issue of the Mekong, let me say something about China. But I need to say from the outset that I'm a student of anthropology and I'm not a China expert. So my view is based on grassroots perspective in Southeast Asia that I have discussed with during our research. The issue about China is that it has become stronger and stronger at a very rapid pace. And it used a lot of charm offensive to win over many countries in Southeast Asia who used to be tribute states to China before. So in a sense, regional stability now is felt like we have to take into consideration China's leadership of the region. Otherwise, we do not have regional stability. That's the common perspective of many Southeast Asian countries, especially the Mekong region. Maybe with the exception of Vietnam, that might have different ideas. But having China as the regional leader for China, this is disrupting the containment strategies imposed upon the region by the United States during the Cold War. And this is what China, I think, has looking for. And since 1997 Asian financial crisis, we see a great deal of warmth and friendship develop bilaterally between China and the Mekong region. China has been seen as, Hun Sen would say, he's a best friend of Cambodia, right? Thailand is also very warm toward China, especially during the Prayut administration. The more authoritarian the government is, the more closer we have with China. So China has used also commercial diplomacy. This is very effective in its, and it used the economic incentive as part of de-securitization strategies to change the image. Once Southeast Asia look at China as a threat, as a communist. Now, no one fear communism any longer. Only the commander-in-chief of the army now, who still talk about communist. He's the only one. So, under Trump, I think Trump is a blessing for China. He has, with his America First, he has reshaped China to adapt faster to the challenges. And this is very, very positive for China. So we are seeing a power shift in the global geopolitical landscape. And Trump wants to resist it. But ASEAN countries, looking from the perspective of ASEAN countries, we have very little choice because ASEAN is only an economic association. We are not a political unit. We do not agree on any political issues. So in this sense, bilateral relations is more important than multilateralism. So each country has tried to gain the most from bilateral relations with China. That's the problem. There's no attempt to look at multilateral agreement. Or, in other words, multilateral agreement has often failed. And if you look at MRC, I'll say a bit more. So, in a sense, growing bilateralism implies that the unity is not an issue. We see a lot of fragmentation instead of unity in terms of ASEAN integration. And we also have inequality in the region. We have a lot of disparity in terms of income between and within the country. Thailand has become one of the most disparity of income. We have the largest disparity of income in the region, if not the world. But China is not without problem. China has a quadruple threat. It has a rapidly aging population and baby crisis. No one in China wants to have baby these days. I think this is also a problem with Japan and Thailand, Singapore. It's a global problem. It has a problem of internal security, real or perceived. That's a problem. China has always been preoccupied with the Muslims, minorities, Hong Kong, and a lot of internal security issues. It also have to face with the middle income trap, as the professor has mentioned. And recently, it has to face with Thucydides trap, the rising tension with the states. So the issue here for China is whether the Communist Party can continue to deliver economic prosperity. That's a real issue, I think, in China. If economic development is no longer viable, then the Communist Party will no longer work. But as far as Xi Jinping is concerned, when he comes to power in 2013, he came up with China Dreams. And it is translated into One Belt and One Road. And now it calls the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a global development strategy now adopted by Chinese government. If you want to do research now, you can do BRI, and you can get a lot of support from China. The Chinese government look at BRI as a bid to enhance regional and global connectivity. That's a formal term that Chinese government use. And China said BRI means opportunities for developing countries. But some observers, especially the West, say, oh, it's about Chinese-centered trading network, a Chinese ambition to be a center of the global economic order. Nevertheless, what does Belt and Road mean for China? China has part of the Chinese economy, it depends on infrastructure. And the real engine of infrastructure development are state-owned enterprise, SOEs. And during the past decade, SOEs have been underplayed. No jobs. That's why China has to go out to look for jobs for SOEs. For in a sense, BRI gives infrastructures, firms, of a way of going out to do more business all over the world. So you look at BRI, you see all these names, big SOEs names. China Railway Group, Great Wall. You go to Cambodia, Great Wall is everywhere. Building condos, building high rises in Kok Phet. So in the end, BRI is an outlet for investment and Chinese firms desperate to keep economic engines growing. This is Chinese attempt, though China's attempt. So from China's perspective, it is a win-win situation. It gives profitable business opportunities to its SOEs, but it also gives developing countries a chance to build infrastructural services. So everyone wins. So in a sense, BRI is an extension of Chinese economy outward. But of course, it has come under a lot of attack of neocolonialism and debt trap, as we all know. So I will just, Maha, when he became the new prime minister, he canceled the project, right? And then a few months later, he went back on track. So you can say how charm offensive is working in Southeast Asia. Even the Southeast Asian strong man cannot resist the Chinese charm. So what about smaller countries in Southeast Asia? So to be fair, I think BRI is not intended as a death trap. It is intended to create more jobs for Chinese companies, while at the same time it gives opportunities for smaller countries to develop its infrastructure. So the problem now that we are facing is the growing challenge with the United States that China is now facing. But two important fault lines are trade wars, which is not ending, no ends in sight yet. Trump said we are going to sign the first agreement soon, but soon will become later. South China Sea is probably a more realistic threat for Southeast Asia, because it may come anytime, a clash maybe. So that's a pretext that I think I would like to share with you. Another point that is also very important is the retreat of Western liberalism. Now, in Asia, we see a lot of China model working among the minds of the Southeast Asian elite. The China model means you have liberalism toward the economy and authoritarianism for the political system. It's working, it's efficient. A lot of leaders in Southeast Asia now think so. And for this reason, they said, why don't we try the Chinese model? So I think the Western liberalism is dying in Asia. With that saying, I think the question is how Japan and ASEAN manage the power contestation between China and US. I think this is the real question that has to be answered. Probably more by Japan than Mekong region countries. I think we know that most ASEAN countries want to avoid being dependent on China. But we have no choice. Or our leaders think that we have no choice. We have unstable political systems all over the Mekong region. Thailand is tilting more and more toward authoritarianism during the past 5 years. Even the election is a fake one, and everyone knows it. With this unstable political system, we have no bargaining power toward the strong man of China, Xi Jinping. He's very charismatic. Prayut even introduced his book as one of the best book to read to his cabinet members. You should read this, he said. I don't know if he has read it because he doesn't read. So in a sense, we are stuck, not with regional interests, but with national and class interests in the Mekong region, in ASEAN, and especially in the Mekong region. National and class interests reign supreme. So strong bilateral, this is a point that cannot be overestimated. Strong bilateral relations go hand in hand with weak multilateral relationship and commitments. And this, we can go to Mekong. MRC has failed over the past decades or so because bilateral relations were weak, were stronger than multilateral commitment. So the river of life and its abundant resources is dying. The river is now just a series of ponds, no life, because of it's now a national Chinese pond up to Myanmar. It's a waterway and cargo transportation waterway. This is technocentrism pushed to the extreme in Chinese mind. They want to dominate nature. This is in contrast with Southeast Asian perspective. We have a great deal of respect toward nature. And of course, China has built more than 10 dams. And now, every country wants to follow suit. Thailand cannot build one of itself, so it supports Sayaburi Dam, right? Give money through IGAT to build the Sayaburi. Laos is building a lot of them. And Cambodia is now building a few more dams. So each country is killing the Mekong River, competing. This is a strategy of the commons in working. We are killing the Mekong together. With, in case of Cambodia and Laos, with Chinese money. So if you look at this map, you see some of the dams that have been constructed and under construction. How can a river sustain itself with all these dams? How could nature sustain itself? This is Jinghong Dam in Yunnan. And fish, it has sustained Southeast Asia, the Mekong region, for thousands of years. Tonle Sap, I think, is dying. And the river delta of Vietnam is also dying. So we see a lot of tragedy of the commons taking place. In terms of hydrology, in terms of agriculture, in terms of fishing, in terms of unrhythmic flood and drought, man-made disasters. We see a great deal of this. And we don't know how to negotiate it with the big brother upstream. Because China insists that it's a Lanchan river. It's a national river. It's not an international river. So, what is to be done? And this, I took the liberty of thinking as a Japanese. Okay? I think we need to find a common cause with the Mekong region, countries. I think this is what Japan has been doing. Find a common cause with the Mekong countries. And I think JICA has been doing that with its work in Myanmar, in Cambodia, in Thailand, in Laos. But the problem, the real problem, is the balance of power. And this problem has never been addressed. We need to address this problem more carefully and more seriously. How do we increase the balance of power in the region? How can we increase the negotiating power? And we need to strengthen regional organization, local organization. A lot of local organizations in Thailand are doing very good job in terms of resource governance. If you look at in Chiang Mai, for instance, it's not the Thai government who rose up against the reef blasting in the Mekong. It's a local organization that rose up and challenged the Chinese government for reef blasting and destroying the fish. So what Japan can do is set a standard of high quality investment on a more transparent manner. I'm not saying that China is less transparent, but I think we need to raise the stake up higher and help more local people. I think this is my last point is that China use G2G contract all the time. We need to go to the grassroots and work with local people more. I think not even with China, Japan, but I think a lot of Western countries can do the same. Go to the local people and strengthen them in their fight to protect the resources. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kapitan Yot. That was a very comprehensive overview, and you've covered a lot of ground. So I just want to tease out a few points before we move on to our next speaker. You know, the battleground that you mentioned about authoritarianism, the more authoritarian the regime, the likelier that it would be closer to China. You know, you can see that in Thailand, Cambodia. The MRC, Mekong River Commission, doesn't work anymore, hasn't done well, and now it's replaced by the LMC, the Lanchang Mekong Corporation. This is China's scheme. So the earlier generation of the Mekong management, MRC, Mekong River Commission, Mekong Agreement, Mekong Institute, within the GMS, that generation, that first generation, no longer effective, and now it's being replaced by China's kind of proposed management around the LMC, Lanchang Mekong Corporation. Your point about it, each country is killing the Mekong River. It's a very good point. It's not just China that building dams, but also even Cambodia, certainly Thailand, Laos. And this is important because it undermines the downstream countries' argument that the Mekong is being abused in the upstream, because China would say, analogous to the South China Sea, China would say that it is not the only country building dams, and it is not the only country constructing artificial islands in the South China Sea. Japan, you know, you look at South China Sea, the main rivalry is US-China. South China Sea has all the major powers in it. The Mekong region, the main rivalry is China-Japan, and most other major powers are not in it. Maybe when we come to the next Q&A, Ajahn Yot, you will have to tell us a little bit about the BRI and mainland Southeast Asia. So mainland Southeast Asia is not on BRI, but it is on one of the corridors, the China-Indochina Peninsula Economic Corridor, SICPEC. And now there's the rail being built from Laos, from Kunming through Laos, 60% done. So we will have rail eventually down here from Kunming. Ambassador Pou Sothirak is my friend and colleague and counterpart from the Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace, set up after the Cambodian conflict, and he's been there some time and engaged in all kinds of think tank workshops and so on. Thank you for coming to Bangkok for this occasion, Ambassador Pou Sothirak. Now for you, Cambodia. Dams up north. You know, I had a title called Under Dam Shadows up north, and Cambodia also building dams. But you know, communities are being affected. What's the outlook from Cambodia?
Thank you very much. First of all, a warm greeting to all of you. I'm very delighted to be here at Chulalongkorn University, a very prestigious university. I thank my good friend Dr. Thitinan for inviting me, but also the Director General from the Japan Foundation, and I'm very honored to be a part of this very prestigious panel. Uh, One point I wanted to start with is this Mekong on more mind. It is definitely on my mind. That for sure I can tell you. I'm very attracted to the Mekong, and partly because I'm very intrigued by the Mekong moods. Sometimes a lot of flood, sometimes very dry, but also stunning view. Sunset in Luang Prabang. You go down from Phnom Penh to Tonle Sap, you see the floating village, the natural setting. So it's definitely on my mind, and I'm sure on many people's mind as well. But the essence of the Mekong River is not just that. It is about nurturing the habitat of a very rich ecosystem, the biology of the river, to sustain both animal, fish, and other animal. There's a lot of thing that we don't talk about. There's now in Cambodia we see bird watching, for example, along the Tonle Sap, and also sustaining the life of those countries that live on the Mekong basin. This is the most important thing about the Mekong River. Unfortunately, the Mekong River today is under stress, very severe stress, imposing mainly, not exclusively, by dam building on its on mainstream and also its tributary. And just to give you some statistic, this is from Stimson Center. There are China. They have 11 dam operating and nine more dam planned. When we talk about China dam, you have to talk about the mega structure of this dam, the waterway that cut across, the storage capacity. China dam is by far bigger, much bigger than any dam built downstream. And now you have 64 dam completed, 63 more in constructions. Thailand completed 9 dam, Vietnam completed 16 dam. Cambodia completed 2 dam, but if you look at the capacity, it's rather small. I'd be very happy to share with you. One dam in Lower Sesan 2 is now operating, and one more plant, Sambo Dam. Professor have shown the slide. If you want more information, I talk to you more about it. So this building of dam is definitely going to harm the Mekong River, but also the drought. The drought that climate change also a part of this very destructive force on the Mekong. I just want to focus on one issue for this conference, is how we, academia, mumble, civil society, people who love the Mekong River, include, I'm sure here I see a few diplomatic corps who are attending. How can we encourage or seduce government to stop building dam on the Mekong? I like just to focus on that, and I have 3 points to make there. How we can make the government of the, I don't pretend to be able to reach out to China, but maybe on the CLMV plus Thailand. So the first things is that we must make sure that policymaker and dam builder, the investor, does not overlook the big picture about mainstream dam and their consequences. And this is very important. Regional policymaker, energy minister, economist, hydropower company, they are totally consumed by the development, infrastructure development that is needed on the Mekong and for the Mekong sub-region. And they consumed by energy supply, they just want more energy, and they are consumed with the idea that the GDP growth based on dam building will improve their national economy. But they're not very good in thinking bigger than that. And that is to say, to see sign. First, see the sign on the Mekong. Today, it's a drought, but if you don't take care of the Mekong can flood it. Part of a community, like the breakdown of dam in Laos, for example. This is not foreseen, and there is collateral damage, I can assure you. So drought and also dam, basically Jinhong Dam, Professor Shon and also Sayaburi have been identified as the two most critical factor that causing a dry up of the Mekong River. So first thing is that how you make the policymaker think bigger than just building dam, because I think that there are enough scholars around the region who can prove that the economic benefit from having dam cannot overtake the social and environmental costs, that if you not carefully study it, it will definitely take over that. So cost benefit of the dam. Secondly, I think that we cannot stop. We meaning member of a free people like you and I. I'm a free people. I was with the government, but I'm no longer with the government as I run in institutions. We must tell the government to apply or to adopt the right standard of building dam. And this is, I refer to the World Commission on Dam and the recommendation that has been made by MRC when it commissions a report done called the Strategic Environmental Assessment on Hydro Dam, which is very good benchmarking. And if you want to build dam, please do those steps properly. That way you will mitigate many of the negative effects from dam on the environment, on the social and the community, does not affect the community. And then my third point is that although energy requirement from CLMV plus Thailand are high, and it's very difficult to make the government stop building dam on the Mekong, but we need to tell the government that there are other sources of alternative to hydro. And with new technology like solar, like wind and biomass, these can compensate or can fill in and can reduce the desire of harming the Mekong by building dam. So these are my 3 points. In fact, if I have time, we should talk about how the low Mekong country effectively deal with the Chinese dam upstream. Professors have talked about it, but we did not know, we have no time to debate about it, or what would be the best way forward for what are the solutions that can help the Mekong from heading toward its tipping point. And these are some of the things, and how you make MRC more credible, more effective. It should be also a topic of discussion. My last point on Mekong is that my message here that we need to stop building dam. I'm not talking about delay or no more dam on the Mekong. And then we need to explore other source of alternative. Stop building dam is not going to solve or make the government stop, but you need to tell the government what are a better way to come up with the energy requirement. Now, I also asked to talk about China's role in the region a little bit. Nobody can stop China, not even USA. China will continue to rise. China will definitely be a major power in the future. We have to settle with that. We have to accept that and make our own decision or make our own adjustment accordingly. Make sure that when you embrace China, China does not really eat you up alive. Sorry to you, it's so straight. So that you don't fall into everything that you've been seeing. So about China, you only need to focus on two major initiatives, the BRI and the LMC. BRI is a mega big Chinese diplomacy that is rolling out to reinvigorate the economy on the one hand, but to meet up with infrastructure that are needed. With the BRI, I only cite 2 or 3 challenges for you to think about. First is the debt trap. There are countries in the region who feel that the money they borrow from China, they cannot be repaying back. And these countries, recently you see, Professor also mentioned Dr. Mahathir, although he first canceled, but now he renegotiated. It's not a canceling, but renegotiation. From what I know is that he's able to bring down some of the project funded by BRI for Malaysia is much lower than the initially set out. In other words, Mahathir was able to talk to China to assess again, because in each of these mega projects, the biggest unseen cost is the corruption. Please, I want to be very straight. It's as high as 20 to 30%. So if you can squeeze that down, the project costs go low. So debt trap first. Second, make sure that any project that you borrow from BRI is comply with environmental and social standard of your country. That is a must. Otherwise, it will be long-term setback for you. This is so important. People don't see this. When you do this, the next generation will thank you much better. Otherwise, the next generation will have to address this very burdensome problem. And my last point about BRI is about we need to worry about the over-dependence on China. Over-dependent on one donor or one partner is not good. So we need to reduce that. And this also can bring about China attention to local context. China build many things, but sometimes they bring even raw material from China. They bring laborer. There's a lot of laborer in Cambodia. And Cambodian people can do. This is happening. This is not good. So these are my point. And last point is about LMC. LMC, just one thing about LMC. Watch out for LMC. There's only 2 things that you need to know about LMC, Lam Chang Mekong Corporation. It's leader-led. All decision is made by the leader. 6 leader will make decision. And then after that, it's project-based with a lot of Chinese money. And then to make sure that all these projects is working in tandem with other existing mechanisms, LMC need to pay attention to coordinations and to how to harmonize, how to coexist, and not to be seen as competing with other existing or chasing out other existing mechanism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Pou Sothirak. That's a good, sobering view from Cambodia. I think that one of the things that comes across, the LMC is the only game in town. I mean, and China is really the only major player in the area. Tough to get around that. Let me move to our speaker from Vietnam. Vietnam will be chairing ASEAN next year. Vietnam also will be taking a place at the UNSC, non-permanent member, Security Council. Big year for Vietnam to 2020. Dr. Chu comes from the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. She's earned her PhD from Murdoch University. But a lot of issues. Vietnam, unlike the other countries that Anyot, is kind of centralized rule, but also has a contentious relationship with China. Not just the Mekong area, but also South China Sea. Vietnam is really the central country because on the one hand, it has a Communist Party as well. It relies on China heavily, but on the other hand, it has a lot of issues and tensions with China in the Mekong area. And Vietnam is also the most downstream. It's the last country that the Mekong flows through, and then the South China Sea. So what would you have to say about the Mekong area management and LMC, Vietnam, downstream? Dr. Chu.
First, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the Japan Foundation and Chulalongkorn University for inviting me to this prestigious forum. I will make my presentation very quickly because you have already listened to the professors and ambassadors. So basically, my presentation will cover 3 areas. First, about the new situations in the Mekong region. Second, about how Vietnam is responding to it. And the third one, what I expect from the external partners, basically Japan. So in terms of the new situation in the region, there are 2 issues I just want to raise. I already mentioned first about the droughts. It's so severe that as you've seen that it becomes severe. For our case, we have a salinization, and for other countries also extreme droughts in the Mekong River region. And in Vietnam, in late May 2019, this year, the water level dropped to the lowest level in more than 100 years. And it's affecting the livelihoods of millions of people. So I just found out the MRC report forecast November 2019, just recently. They forecast that the droughts will be very severe, especially in Thailand, in Laos, and Cambodia. The reasons we are talking about the dams, but truly speaking, in Vietnam, we do not very popular about the ideas of dams. We talk more about the climate change and the reason of salinization. I don't know if the mass media is controlled by the government or not. That's why the issues of dams are not raising. But yes, we understand that there's a situation of climate change here, and Vietnam is one of the countries that suffer most from the climate change, and especially with the Mekong Delta River. And of course, we had to say about the man-made activities that China's building so many dams, as you say, 64. Other ASEAN countries also building. And Laos has a very ambitious plan of building 400 dams, becoming a powerhouse of this region. It's really devastating if it's happening. And then I also, second point, I see the new progress in the regional cooperation. I see that the Mekong region has attracted more attention from the external partners. As you see that Mekong regions has been included in the ASEAN's initiatives for ASEAN integration. And we see the new mechanism like MLC, as you say, Mekong Langshan cooperation initiatives led by China, established since 2016 and move very fast. And then we see the restructuring of the existing mechanisms of lower Mekong initiatives led by the US, ACMEX. And then just yesterday, we see the upgraded mechanisms of the first Mekong Republic of Korea summit, elevating from ministerial level to summit level. So we see, I just make a list, only 4 pictures of the most important partners. So I see that the attention of the external partners are always linked to their global initiatives. For example, MLC is a part of China's BRI, US Indo-Pacific strategy, also linked with the LMI. Japan's open free Indo-Pacific strategy. Also here we have the Mekong Japan Summit, and also South Korea's new Southern Policy 2.0 also linked with us, Mekong Summit, and India's Act East policy. So I wonder that why it's happening is like so in a very short term that it becomes Mekong becomes so attractive. The first reason, I think, of course, if you read all the papers, quite the same thing. We share the core values and interests that to build a community for rule of law, for economic prosperity, peace and stability. But I think different countries will have a different interest in this area. For example, Japan, for South Korea, maybe they will look at ASEAN countries, mainland countries, as the fastest growing region, as you say. Japan also look at the same thing, but with Japan, maybe more competitive, great power politics. And the US maybe also same views, geopolitical competition. So it seems that Mekong River now has become a new theater of great power competition with new actors. And one of the reasons also because of the security issues here, with the rising traditional and non-traditional security issues, we see so many natural disaster, trafficking, cross-border crimes, and I think the US is more concerned about the security issues, especially when China's now carry out a joint patrol with Thailand and Cambodia across the river, Mekong River, deep into Golden Triangle. So it seems that the Mekong River is not only about the development, also about security. So what are the opportunities for the regional countries and for us? Of course, when we have more people coming, we have more opportunities for development, for connectivity, and chances to deal with the climate change, more external resources, finance, human resources development, technology, and we can avoid political, economic, social overdependence on one country. We all mentioned about that. So what are the challenges? So basically, currently, as you see that the drought in the region, we face the food security. As for Vietnam, we place very high priority on food security because we export to nearly 200 nations, and we are the second largest rice exporter in the world. But with the drought, we have reduced thousands of hectares of rice production, and sometimes the salinization come deep into the inland, about 70 kilometers. So we're facing as already mentioned, unsustainable developments, dams. And I also agree with you. You say that we are fragmented cooperation mechanisms and use of resources. We have currently 15 mechanisms, but I think they are not good enough, mainly because we lack of coordination among mainland countries. And also because we haven't put the Mekong region's issues as a top priority in ASEAN agenda. And so, and more importantly, now as I say that with the context of the new theater of great power competition, we do not expect it, but we are forced to get involved in this competition, and we have to face a risk of taking side, losing neutrality and ASEAN centrality. So what is our response? As all you know that Vietnam places South China Sea as the first priority, and Mekong is the second top priority of Vietnam's foreign policy. As the objectives is we focus on economic development and sustainable water resource development in the Mekong region. And we linked this Mekong policy with our water security, energy security, food security, human and environment security, climate change, as you will see. And we also make a link between Mekong policy with our international economic integration policy, ASEAN policy, neighboring countries, and major power politics. So what do we expect from Japan? So we already mentioned about that we are forced to build dams. We are forced to, have a stronger relationship with China. So I was thinking what the reasons why we have to choose that when actually we should have chosen otherwise. Building dams, I don't think that our Mekong region countries want to build dams. But if just think otherwise, if we do not build dams, who will come and build? I think the outsider will come and build. And with their vast and major financial resources, they will not build it small. They will make a huge dams. So So it's better that we have to be involved in it so that we can, in one way, engage and control the scale of the dams. And the second thing, then we also know that what are the alternatives, initiatives that we can get? We should go for the renewable energy instead of the dam. But why do we still have to build the dam? Because we lack of the support from external countries like Japan. So we expect that Japan can come in and provide us with more alternatives choices. And we look at here, Japan has been a traditional and trustful partner of the region. Trustful is very important, as I think it's a top priority for cooperation. Japan has been in the region for a long time, since 2007, with the expanding until now as very systematically and organized. And in the region, I see that Japan see the Mekong region as a bridge between Indian and Pacific Ocean, and an important part of your strategy. And you apply a G20 Principles for Quality Infrastructure Investment, which emphasizes on openness, transparency, economic efficiency, and debt sustainability that are still lacking in the region. And that is also very matching with your suggestion that we should have good principles, standards, high standards. So I think currently we don't have the G20 principles in the region, especially if we look at the BRI projects. China hasn't followed yet. So we hope that if with the Japanese coming in, then new principles and new standards will be applied. And I also see that Japan has changed its approach. Before that, it is Japan's cooperation bilaterally, but now you more with regional, multilateral regional cooperation. You cooperate with the US to make a Japan-US Mekong power partnership. You established a third-party market with China, and you have more cooperation with AMEX and MRC. The third-party market with China, I think is a very, very, very interesting idea. I'm thinking that maybe it's not a kind of co-financing, but it's maybe like Japan enterprises will build infrastructure and sell it back to the China. So in that way, we are so sure that the quality must be good and high. But it also has some disadvantages, yes, because we are so concerned with China's hidden purposes behind the BRI. So maybe we have to clarify that, otherwise we are so concerned about this. Vietnam and Japan has already implemented about 100 projects within the Mekong framework. But as you see, it's all relating to the infrastructure. We have the deep sea port. We have the terminal international airport. We have a power plant project. We have the clearance system, international airport, high-speed railway. I think this is very interesting. In the MRC, we do not focus on the cooperation relating to the sea. It's just Mekong River. But here we have the deep sea port. So it means a lot. We have a very higher level of trust. That's why Japan can join in very sensitive security issues here. But I think Japan can expand more to provide us solutions to deal with climate change and sustainable usage of water. There's one point that the existing mechanisms are all about the river, but we still like a very effective, sustainable usage water management system. And it seems that it's neglected or people avoid it. The MLC has focused more on economic development. LMI is the same thing about the women, about the children, but not about the water usage. I think it's very complicated. That's why they still avoid it. So here, what I expect from Japan as well as from other partners, that please come in and give us more sustainable development policy choices for regional countries. For example, here I just make a few suggestions, but it's not everything, of course. Like for example, in agriculture, that if it's possible that Japan can provide us with transfer of technology, smart agriculture for sustainable use of water resources, and of course, more chance to export to the agricultural market of Japan. So if we have smart agriculture, we do not have to use contaminated water, and we do not have to use so much water that we have to rely on the river. And then energy infrastructure. Currently, we rely very much on China's investment in the energy. But I think Japan can join with, support us, invest more in renewable energy so that we have more sustainable energy resources like solar, wind. We do not have to rely on dams. And yes, as I already mentioned, that we expect Japan to come in to enhance the quality and governance, which are still lacking in the BRI projects of China. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chu. We'll also make the PowerPoint available subsequently to share with the audience because they're very good points you made. Look, the floor is open for questions, comments. I'll just begin. If there's any questions, comments, please prepare them. But you mentioned it's interesting that says a lot for Vietnam to peg the Mekong issues as the second most important priority in Vietnam's foreign policy. I did not know that. South China Sea, of course, paramount. This is very high priority for Vietnam. You also mentioned about the China-Japan kind of realignment, maybe early signs of realignment following the trip that Prime Minister Abe made to China in October 2018, signing a number of memoranda of cooperation, 52, I think. So Japan, China now cooperating in third markets. We have some projects here, including the Smart City project in Thailand, based on China-Japan cooperation. I was going to ask a question about whether the Mekong countries see Japan as a hedge vis-a-vis China. But there's also could be another question asked of whether we could see Japan and China working together on Mekong development issues. I'm going to leave that for now, and I'll come to the audience. Any questions, comments?
I have been meeting many of the Vietnamese colleagues lately in Vietnam, outside Vietnam, and so on. And I have been urging my Vietnamese friends, in view of the fact that they're going to become the chair of ASEAN in a few days' time, that Vietnam must take the lead both on the Mekong question and on the South China Sea. Without that, then I think we could not move in order to have a sort of a collective position, which would, of course, also reflect the principle of ASEAN centrality, so that we can avoid what Dr. Yot has been saying a few minutes ago, this bilateral approach, and each of us in the ASEAN countries has been eaten alive by the Chinese from Beijing with their offers of money under the table and so on. So the problem is our leadership has been bought out and neglecting the common good of ASEAN. But hopefully the strength of the Vietnamese Politburo and the Central Committee would bring back Vietnam to the fore and take the lead of ASEAN. I do place that hope in the Vietnamese leadership at this point in time. Not a comment, but an urge, especially to the lady professors from Vietnam. Thank you.
Neutrality, we talk about ASEAN is negotiating with China on a code of conduct for the South China Sea. But on the Mekong, it's not all ASEAN. It's just the 5 countries of ASEAN. So when it comes to the ASEAN Secretariat, the ASEAN Centrality, and all the ASEAN architecture, we don't have all ASEAN in. And this is one fundamental difference. And hence, the Lan Chang Mekong Cooperation, which has already held 2 summits in just 5 years, it's gone way ahead. That's why I think the Mekong countries, I'll be interested to get responses from the speakers. They have nowhere else to go, right? Is China and LMC. Japan to an extent, but when we see a lot of projects with Japan, but there's some limitations to that. What do you think, Ambassador Pou Sothirak? Well, about China, we have nowhere else to go. Is China, Mekong area. Unlike South China Sea.
I don't think that the thinking about we have nowhere to go, therefore we go there, to one place, the only one. I don't believe that that should be the way of thinking. It is true that today you need to be very aware that what China does, it will get the attention of not only Southeast Asia but even American. We did not talk much about the political security ramification of the Indo-Pacific strategy that the US is playing at the moment in countries like Japan and the Quad, for example. They have their own way of thinking about how to go about limiting China's sphere of influence. But I'm coming back to the point that first and foremost, it's true. You look at the 5 countries, the Mekong country, when we submit project to get money from China on LMC, Lam Chang Mekong Corporation, it is done Cambodia with China, Thailand with China, Vietnam with China, but there's no CLMV Thailand and China. This is something that if Vietnam want to take a leadership, but I would prefer that Thailand take a leadership, because LMC was proposed by Thai Prime Minister and taken up by China Premier Li Keqiang, and that's culminating in the Sanya Declaration. It is stated that it is an initiative from Thailand. So I think Thailand should take a role. Also, Thailand can do more as well, because Thailand is very advanced in terms of institutional capacity and also the framework through which you can work together. I think it's a little bit better. Although China holds strategic issues, but when you put Vietnam, but when you put Vietnam in the front row, China will not agree. I can tell you for sure. If you want to push, Vietnam to the forefront, it will be problematic. That's my view. Thank you.
I think that's a fair point that Thailand, because of various reasons, has a kind of a broker image, right? It has a position and a past that would enable it to play a kind of a mediating role. And to that extent, the ACMEX is coming back into play. The Ayeyarwady Japan-Mekong Economic Cooperation Strategy, ACMECS, actually a scheme from 2003. And then because of the Thai domestic politics, it became dormant for a while. But it's been revived over the last couple of years, and I think it's gaining some currency, some traction, because I think people are looking in this region away from not just the LMC. MRC, China's not a member. Myanmar not a member. So ACMEX is being promoted now, and I think it's gaining some reception in Hanoi and in Myanmar and Laos and Cambodia, because it's an alternative to an LMC. I'll just come to Dr. Yot and Yot. Tell us a little bit about being based up north and then the Yunnan, Kunming. This is the corridor called the China-Indochina Peninsula Economic Corridor, SICPEC, but the idea is that we will have a railway coming down from Kunming through Laos and to Nong Khai, and then the northeast of Thailand to Bangkok. Nong Khai to Bangkok is about 607 kilometers. The Lao rail is going to be finished in a couple of years. I mean, I had my doubts, but I think it's 60% done now. Several years ago, I thought, not going to happen, but it's happening, and I think it'll be finished. But for Thailand, the completion of the Lao rail will put more pressure on Thailand to complete its portion, and they envisage that this rail would all go all the way to Singapore. But Ajahn being up north, you see a lot of influence from Yunnan and the rail plant from Kunming.
Well, you see, the case with China is that it's not only fast, but it is very active. It never ceases to amaze us with new projects, new activities every day. It's like a hyper person ready to invest in everything. This is, I think, the problem with dealing with China. You always come with new project. I think the train is just a case in point. I don't think Thai people will use the train. If based on their calculation, it will Chiang Mai, Bangkok would cost about 2,500 baht. Low cost now 900 baht, and it takes 1 hour. The train will take 3.5 hours. I don't think anyone will, for the sake of trying, maybe once. But as a regular customer, no one in the right mind will take it. So it's catered for tourists. And who's the tourist? Not Japanese now, right? And it will be another channel for more Chinese to come in. And from our experience in northern Thailand, Chinese come and they never leave. They, I'm not saying about even on the plane. By bus, you look at the bus station, the ones that come in is fully loaded. The one that depart is only maybe 5 seats were taken. And this has happened for Vietnam, Lang Son corridor, or in Laos, in Luang Nam Tha province. They come by the bus load, and only 5 or 6 maybe going back. So what we are saying is that there are all levels of Chinese investment in the region. And this is why China is unstoppable. Because one of the main thrust of China's role in the Mekong region is the population. They play a great deal of role. When China comes to Laos 30 years ago, in the mid-80s, only labor come in. They come to build roads on the border. But when the contract stopped, when the contract ended, these labor do not go back. They stay and start small business. They become petty traders. And within a few years, they start to open shops. And now they own small restaurants, small guest house in Laos. The same in Thailand, but only faster. And this goes, I think, for Cambodia too. So it's this diversity of different levels of investment that is the thrust of the.
Thank you. We'll take a question, comment from Ambassador of Switzerland.
Good morning. My name is Helen. I'm the Ambassador of Switzerland. I have a question for the Vietnamese panelist. Recently, there's been some news circulating that the Vietnamese oil company PetroVietnam will actually invest into a huge dam in Luang Prabang, Laos. After what you explained to us, the devastating effects of dam actually on Vietnam, we were sort of surprised to hear that now Vietnamese companies are investing into huge dams. So what does this mean? Is this a change of mind of your government?
I just have a question to follow up, Dr. Your observation about just the trends in population. With the rise of the Chinese middle class, you'd expect more inflows of migrants from China across, Chiang Mai, and of course downstream to other Mekong countries. And I think we're starting to see that, for instance, with education, and you can see that in Thailand's education sector with more Chinese students. But if you cast that trend across to the lower Mekong countries as well, what does the panel see as happening with the trends with the migration of the Chinese diaspora across the Mekong region, including, starting SMEs, where I think one of the panelists mentioned that the full production cycle often comes with labourers and exports back to China. So what do those trends look like, say, in 10 to 20 years' time? And just a second question of how do you think the Chinese apparatus might seek to control that movement in migration to other countries in the Mekong?
Okay, that's very good to end the questions and comments. Ajahn Yot, we'll come to you first. We'll go down this way, upstream, downstream, and then we'll have Professor Tanaka as our last speaker for a minute or so each. We're running out of time. Ajahn Yot, the expanding Chinese diaspora, and you've done a lot of research on this. What do you think? Please.
It will take hours to talk about this. Diaspora has been part of Chinese history for centuries. There are already 5 waves of Chinese movement out of the country. This latest move is only taken for 3 decades, since the 80s. But the difference is that previously you have the diaspora with weak state. So migrants or diaspora go out and try to survive on their own. But these days, they go out and they have a very strong and proactive state backing them up. So if you look at, for instance, small traders going to Myanmar to set up shops, they can get the full support from the Chinese government, both provincial and national government, to support them for information, for guidelines, for loans. They have money for, they give money to Chinese associations, and Chinese associations will give out low interest loans to any newcomers with information, with legal advices, with anything that they want. So with this backing of the powers, and if you look at the organization of foreign affairs in China, you see that a lot of agencies have been set up over the years to support the going out policy. So this has been going on for 2 decades at least. So we see a very, very strong push for Chinese diaspora to go out. And these people, they are patriots. They go out and try to make China great again. In America, you only have one guy to push for this. That is the president. But in China, you have millions of patriots going out to make China again, great again. And they have a century of shame to provide impetus, to provide motive for this. And they have the money to invest. they have education. So they have everything now. And that's why we have to embrace China no matter what. But we need, that's why I stress the term balance of power. We need to strike a balance and try to get the best deal out of the situation.
Good takeaway, being great again. America, we're talking a few decades in terms of time span. China, we're talking centuries being great again. Ambassador Pou, last minute of comments, remarks?
Very quick on migration, and I want to also link with the worker overseas. Perfect example to talk about this is that if you visit Sihanoukville, you will see the Cambodian normal people now begin to feel the Chinizations of Cambodia. That Cambodia there is Chinatown now in Sihanoukville. If you visit, if those of you who have not visited, please visit, then you can see the fast speed and the non-stoppable and everything that will happen there. Particularly on the not so conducive for long-term development of Cambodia is the development of a casino. 83 casino, percent are Chinese owned. I told my friend in China, I said, look, this is going to burn your credit. China rights have to be respectful. China rights have to be for the good of everybody. But if you allow so many Chinese money to come here and just invest in the wrong sector in my small little country, it will not be good for you. And you know what my Chinese friend told me? Well, your government have a task to not giving them license. You see, this is a problem. It takes two to tango. Casino can only operate if you apply for license. License, the normal cost of license is one thing, but the unseen cost is another thing. This is the problem. That's why I told my Chinese friend also, I tell them back, look, you know it, that there's a lot of fishy-washing going on. Try to stop that. So this is a problem about China rights. They will do, like you said, not only out of their own nationalistic, but on greed. They see opportunity in Cambodia to make money illicitly. They will do it, and this is not right. So that my message to China: please don't do that. One last minute, I just want to. I was not asked to talk about Japan, but I hold dearly Japan. I was Cambodian ambassador to Japan. I definitely believe that Japan have a role to play in the Mekong. Japan, in fact, Japan-Mekong cooperation is probably longer than China and spend a lot of money, but nobody know about it. And I believe that Japan can be a balance to China and influence in this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Pou Sothirak. Very good point, by the way. One downside risk of China's rise and spread is that there could be a popular backlash against it. We're seeing some of the pushback against the debt diplomacy and so on, but popular backlash is very possible as well. Dr. Chu, if you could, there's a question about the dam, investing in dam construction in Luang Prabang, Vietnamese company. But on top of that, if you have any signs or comment to make about Vietnam's chairmanship of ASEAN, the theme seems to be cohesiveness and responsiveness, but any priorities for Vietnam's chairmanship of ASEAN, if you can tell us, share with us? But the dam first, the dam first.
Okay. For ASEAN's chairmanship, I just follow up with what you say. The priorities already announced very clearly. I think first of all, we focus on ASEAN first. For building the community, for connectivity, for development, for prosperity. And second, we're going with the partnership with all the external partners. I think that is the very key messages, and we focus on the digital economy. It means that we will follow up with what Thailand has done about smart city, so we follow up with that. And we also pave the way for the next country, Indonesia chairmanship next year. So it means that it's quite a straightforward leading ASEAN countries. So consistently over times, different chairmanship of different countries. We preserve what we have done, and we pave the way for the next one. So that is a key priorities. In terms of the comments about Vietnam can become a forefront in the ASEAN in terms of the Mekong region, actually I don't think that we should choose Thailand or Vietnam who is should be a better forerunner, because I don't think that is a good approach. I think the first of all, the good approach should be the strong coordination among ourselves, 4 countries. If we go together. If we raise the issue in ASEAN, we should have someone to back us. Like if Thailand raise, we back. If Vietnam raise, Thailand and Cambodia and Laos back off. So we have to go together. But for us, as I already mentioned, that we focus more on South China Sea, and we have a very clear plan how to do it at national level, ASEAN regional level, international level, at academy, at think tank, at policymakers. I mean, in all fronts, we have a plan, it's very clearly. But until now, we haven't got that for Mekong. So first of all, we have to do it at national level, so for a common understanding among different ministries about the importance and the serious situation of Mekong region. As already mentioned to you that in the mass media, they do not see the main reasons from dams. They say climate change. So it means that the common understanding of the people and the ministry should be, changed. And then we can move forward. I think I'm very happy to just discuss with Ambassador Pou that 4 countries, we had a meeting just yesterday. I think it's a very good and timely meeting to strengthen our coordination for the Mekong region, river. And so that is my comment about Vietnam's or Thailand's forefront. And the question you were asking me about the dam, actually this is not the first time that I listened to this question. What I see that is the government's quite conflicting in the dilemma in themselves. On one way, they say that the government say that we do not support dams. On the other hand, they send out of the biggest SOE to Laos and build the dams. I think we have to, as an observer, I think we have to put, first of all, the political relationship here. Laos is a special, neighboring countries also have a special relationship with Vietnam, and we respect their all legitimate interests of development. And they say that they have no other choice for development but building dams and making the Laos become a powerhouse. So of the Southeast Asia, a battery of the Southeast Asia with a very ambitious plan of 400 dams. So I was thinking that maybe one of the reasons, if they already got that plan in the hand, they will ask for the support from whoever are ready to help. And China is there, of course, the first priority, and other neighboring countries. And they also have to think how they sell it out, what the national or regional grid. So I think that the government will consider first political relationship. Second, if we do not jump in, someone will jump in. And with huge amount of money, they will build mega dams. So that's why maybe we just make some investments, more one. Thai also participate in building dams. Even the Thai government also doesn't have a policy of building dams. So I think we are get stuck and we are in dilemma that we want alternative solutions, more renewable energy, not relying on dams which are not sustainable. That's why I say that we expect Switzerland, Japan and other countries to come here and support us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chu. Professor Tanaka, we began with your keynote. We would like to end with just 1 minute from you. That's the last minute. In a way, Mekong area, China has stolen Japan's thunder Japan has been here much longer, but now it's kind of China, China, China. So how should we be seeing China in this space? And you think in big picture. So what are we looking at here? China in mainland Southeast Asia, but even broader. Last minute of your insight and expertise, please.
Well, thank you very much. How to construct a healthy, mutually beneficial relations with China is a challenge to nowadays everyone, every country in the world. From Chinese perspective, with its own big size, it is in their own interest to divide and rule, emphasize bilateral negotiations. Under bilateral negotiations, they have an edge, so that they could expect, they can simply propose, give or take. And then generally they will take it, despite potential damage to their own national interests, or more broadly on a regional interest. I think today's discussion demonstrated very much the Mekong River is a great commons for at least 5 countries involved. But this commons is a peculiar character that not all of them share the same burden or same benefits. It seems China, located on the upper stream, could take away all the benefits they got without worrying about the damage that their activities might have caused in the downstreams. And there are very few means of the downstream countries to persuade the Chinese to share the responsibilities. Then what are we going to do? I think it is the matter of bargaining power. I think Professor Yos emphasized the balance of power, the consideration. But so at least, 4 other countries have to get together to make all their efforts to persuade the Chinese to maintain the ecosystem so that the commons would not get into the tragedy. But maybe even 4 powers combined may not have a sufficient amount of bargaining power against China. Then what are we going to do? I think the issue should be internationalized. That's, I think, our Chinese friends would hate it the most. This is the issue of sovereignty. And China, I think, even doesn't regard the Mekong as an international river. But I think in order for the rest of the Mekong other countries, then they had to make their all efforts to the fate of the Mekong should be an international concern, rather than the concern only to the 5 countries. And so I think ASEAN has been a great scheme to cope with its relations with major countries in the world, mainly because they get together, 10 countries. And so I think, I'm not sure, under the Vietnam's chair in the coming year, can ASEAN pick up the Mekong issue as an ASEAN issue, or sometimes even ASEAN plus 3 issue, even an East Asia Summit issue. I think the larger the better. I think, so it's not simply the matter of distribution of power generation. It's the matter of the health of ecosystem, climate change, so that all, other countries that have no direct sovereignty over the Mekong can claim that the fate of Mekong should be also our fate. And I think that's what Americans, Japanese, Australians argue with respect to the case of South China Sea. South China Sea is a major portion, according to their view, is high seas. And so that's not simply the issues of the coastal countries. It's an international issue. So I think whether the 5 Mekong countries can agree to expand the Mekong issue to an international issue, it is, I think, going to be very critical in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tanaka. Ending on an instructive note, I think that's a very instructive recommendation. I'm sorry that we have exceeded time. Thank you very much for being here. Please join me in thanking the speakers who have been flown in, who have spent time from outside coming here to be with us and sharing their expertise. Thank you very much. Thank you.